Buenas noches, mi nombre es Antonio Díaz Oliva, soy periodista, escritor, traductor. Quiero darles la bienvenida a esta nueva actividad del Festival Puerto de Ideas Valparaíso, Cómo envejece la contracultura, en la que conversaré con el escritor escocés Irvine Welsh, conocido por su novela Trainspotting y por contar los males que atraviesa la sociedad de Edimburgo y de otras partes también. Este año Puerto de Ideas Valparaíso celebra su 10º aniversario gracias al apoyo de Colbún, Copeuch, Fundación Mar Adentro y el Ministerio de las Culturas. Hi, Irvine. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
All good. I'm really excited to talk with you. I have so many questions, but let's start with this one. I was researching and I found this piece in which a magazine asks you to write a letter to your 25-year-old. So, maybe we can start with you when you were 25-year-old. What was happening with you?
Well, I think in your 20s, you're just trying to work out your place in life. And I had done all sorts of weird stuff. I'd been a drug addict, and then I was a kind of responsible managerial type with decent job, lovely wife, and a beautiful home, and still not fulfilled. Looking for what But I think that's the lesson, that you can't really do that. Your life is experiential; it has to be lived. And you have to be able to make all these different mistakes, and you have to be able to do different things to find out what you want to be. And for me, it was a process of elimination, that I wanted to be an artist of some kind. I wanted to be like a musician or a writer or a painter, and to express myself in that way. And it was like, it was really just finding that out, that, I wasn't cut out to be a drug addict, but I also wasn't cut out for the world of work. But, so, I mean, some kind of an artist was really the only option I had.
Mm. So you had like a desire to be creative, but you were trying to see where to put that creativity in a way. Like you were into music, you were into writing, you were into different things. How would you describe that creative, urge or like drive that you had back then?
It's like an itch that you have to scratch. It's like something that you get excited about things, and you get excited. You have a train of thought that excites you, and it's very abstract. It doesn't really mean anything to anyone else. It's a purely personal kind of discourse that you're having, and you have to find a way to express that, to get that out in some ways. And it took me a long time to find that kind of avenue, to find a way that I could get all this kind of weird, speculative, mad, kind of rambling thoughts, and to make something from it. You want to make something. You want to kind of, you want to have a book at the end of it. You want to have a piece of music, recorded at the end of it. You want to have a painting at the end of it. So you want to have something that's a kind of output that approximates all the stuff that's going on in your head.
Mm. Where were you when you were 25? You said you were married. You had like a house and everything. But where were you?
Yeah, I was in London. And I was just kind of getting myself together. I was kind of coming out of a bad phase, and I was kind of had a job and a nice girlfriend. I was just about to get married, and everything was very rosy on the surface of it, but I didn't feel properly centered in myself. I didn't feel connected to myself. And I think if you're not doing what you feel you're supposed to do in life, I think you are disconnected from yourself. And I think there's something that's quite a kind of an unsatisfying place to be, because you're not really living life in your own terms. You're not really doing what you're meant to do.
Mm. All right, so you were 25 and you were in London, but you were born in Scotland. And maybe you can tell us, about your childhood and teenagehood. Like, what was that like?
Yeah, childhood was great, really. I mean, I think you kind of, I don't quite trust myself to say that, because I think you always, when you get to my age, you're always kind of rose-tinted glasses and all that, And I think that, the negative thing about childhood was my father being very sick, and that kind of was a kind of horrible thing that was going on in the background. But my day-to-day life was actually really good. I had a lot of kind of really good friends, and I grew up in the Port of Leith, and then we moved down to the prefabricated buildings at Pult, and then onto the the Masonette Flats at Muirhouse, and I kind of had I had good friends, and I had also a big extended family, so that I could go and visit people, and I could get I could get my dinner in one house, and then if I was still hungry, I could go to another house and get kind of eat there, like almost like a cat who just kind of went around and had multiple owners, basically. So I kind of I enjoyed kind of being. I kind of always had a feeling that I wanted to grow up so that I could have money and I could travel and I could do things. But I quite enjoyed being a kid. I quite enjoyed. I had two different sides to me. I had the arty poncy side, that if I would write girls' romantic poems and stuff like that, which was a bit poncy in a dock town, basically. But I was also into the boxing. I would go to the boxing club, and I was also into football and playing football. So I was kind of one of the boys as well. So there was a kind of duality in my life between sport and art, which I've always tried to keep. It's always been important for me to keep that going.
Was there a difference at that time between so-called like highbrow art and like like middlebrow, or like something like between like like pop culture or like classical culture, or like books and music were everything in the same like
well there was no real culture for me at all in a lot of ways until Bowie. I mean, Bowie was a sort of revelation for a lot of working class kids, because he was accessible as a glam rock musician, but he was also an incredibly generous artist in the way that he shared all his influences and his back catalogue. So from Bowie, I got into I got into the Velvet Underground, and I got into New York punk, and I got into soul, I got into Luther Vandross, and I got into Marvin Gaye, and then I got into like Kraftwerk and electronic music, which became a lifelong obsession, basically. So Bowie actually kind of in his own way got me into rave and all that as well. So it was. That was the kind, and he got me like William Burroughs, kind of got me into sort of literature, and so that was the kind of cut-off point for me, that everything became possible really through David Bowie.
And then like now we know that all that or we call it counterculture, because it was in a way like opposing to a traditional way of life. But back then, obviously, you didn't know that, what you were like experiencing in books and in music, it was counterculture. And do you think that Bowie and like the Velvet Underground and William Burroughs, like they also instill in you a desire to like leave Scotland and like go out there too?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I always had the desire to travel, because I had relatives in London, and I used to go down there in the summer holidays. And it was almost like then the punk thing kicked off, and it was almost like it just like was assumed when I got to a teenager that I would go down to London. It just kind of seemed a natural thing for me to do. And then when I was in London, I loved London, but I wasn't really, I loved Edinburgh as well, but I wasn't really satisfied with being in London. I wanted to. When I was 20, I went to New York, and then I went across to LA to see America and all that. And I was always very hungry for travel and for experiences, and to meet people and to kind of get involved in sort of different scenarios and different lives. And I think, all that stuff fuels your imagination as a writer. And it was like, the desire to travel was always massively important to me.
And what happened in 1978 when you arrived to London, and like punk, it's like happening? What was happening with your life, and why did you leave to London?
I was I was going between Edinburgh and London, and I was mainly in a kind of I spent I worked in sort of different jobs in both places, and spent most of the summer in Green Park, basically kind of sleeping there during the day and going to places like the Vortex in Soho at night, where you could see all these bands that they weren't the big kind of punk iconic bands like the Clash and the Sex Pistols and all that, but I got into bands like kind of 999 and Chelsea and the UK Subs and all that, which had a kind of more sort of working class kind of following in a way. There wasn't the art house kind of Bromley contingent, Susie and the Banshees and all that. It was much more of a kind of it was crapper bands, basically, but I really enjoyed them. I liked to sort of, I liked the people that went there, and we were almost, I wouldn't say second tier punks because it was original punks, but it was a great bunch of people. I mean, I was spending a lot of time in Southall and Middlesex at my auntie's, and a bunch of us used to get on the 207 bus and just go right down into the West End, you know, into Shepherd's Bush, and then onto the tube into Soho. And it was absolutely fabulous times. You know, you get turfed out about 3 a.m, and you'd have to wait to, you know, you'd wander around and wander west, and then eventually you'd pick up a bus. And there were very few night buses then, but it was a big adventure. A bunch of punks would walk down to, some of them would get off at Ealing, some of them would get off at Hanwell, and some of them would get off at Southall. Some of them would stay on to Hayes, and, you know, but it was just great fun. And there's a great sense of togetherness, and it was wonderful for me, kind of like being Scottish and not from being around there, but being accepted by kind of West London punks and kind of looked after and becoming one of the gang.
And well, you went to London also to be a musician, and you play in, I think, in different bands. Maybe I'm not correct, but one of them was called Pubic Lice.
I was never very good. I never had the keyboarding and the fretboarding skills. You know, you have to kind of be able to match your brain patterns up with what your fingers and do and all that. And I wasn't really good at that. And it was very frustrating because every time a band I was in got good, I would be the first one to be thrown out of it, basically. They would move on, you know. And it's, you know, and considering punk wasn't known for its musicianship standards, it was like, you know, it shows how bad it was, really. It was very poor indeed. But one thing I did do that kind of stuck with me from these days was that I noticed that I had the ability to write lyrics, and I was always writing ballads. I was telling a story in song. So basically the stories kind of grew out of the songs. I just got rid of the music and just kind of kept writing stories. And I always loved balladeers, always loved kind of people like Lou Reed and Nick Cave and, you know, people, Shane MacGowan, you know, people who could kind of tell a story in a song.
So in a way you were like writing songs, and do you think like some of those songs evolved into the writer that later became like books, or there was like a stage in between of you like just dropping music and like becoming more like into writing more seriously maybe?
Yeah, I mean, I was mad about music because as we working class, music's the art form that touches you. You know, you don't live in a house which is a big study full of books and all that. So your music's your access point. And it was always my first love. And it still is, really, I suppose. But literature kind of came later. As I started to kind of get into writing stories, I got more into reading stuff, and I got more into reading, and it took off from there. Basically, I kind of got very, very hungry for reading because I neglected it when I was younger and at school. I hadn't really got into doing the, you know, you have all the classic books on the list that you have to read and all that. Never read any of them, you know, and I didn't like being told what to do when I was at school. I hated being, you know, and I was very like not rebellious in a sense of kind of making trouble. I was rebellious in a sense of just opting out. I just thought, this is not for me. I'm just not interested in this. And I just never did it, you know. So I kind of just, but later on, you know, I started to read things like kind of Jane Austen. I started to read Moby Dick, all these things that they told you to read at school that I never did. And I kind of got obsessed with all sorts of different writers and different novels. And, you know, I went from, you know, from British literature into American literature, into Russian, European literature. And, you know, it's like sort of, so I just branched out from there, you know, and you got into, you know, it's like everybody has one thing that's a cut-off point. You know, you get into Russian literature through Crime and Punishment. You just go through the rest. You know, you go on Dostoevsky, Tolstoy, and kind of, you know, all that. And it's the same with, you know, it's like South American literature is kind of Gabriel Garcia Marquez, 100 Years of Solitude, 1,000 Years of Solitude. You just, you know, you jump into that, and then you hit off on all the writers that are kind of, you know, that are translated into English. So same with American writers. Burroughs kind of, you know, you get into all the, either the beat stuff from Burroughs, you go to Bukowski, then you go to all the kind of more mainstream writers that you've kind of sort of like Updike and people like that, you know. So you just go through you go around the houses basically, and you know, I'm kind of one of the great things about COVID is that I've got right back into reading again. I've just kind of thrown away the TV, and I just decided I wasn't going to vegetate. I wasn't going to sit in front of the television all night. I was just going to read. I was going to listen to music, and that's all I've been doing.
That's interesting. I'm going to ask you about books on television, but before that, so, you know, you were getting more deep into literature and like reading and all that. This is when you were in London again, and you were like experimenting with writing. This is like your late 20s, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, and then, you know, I know that some early drafts of Trainspotting were publishing like some literary magazine and anthology. So maybe if you could tell us about that, you know, the moment in which you start to get published.
Well, I was very lucky because what happened was that there was a great, when I was in Edinburgh, and I'd come up to Edinburgh from London, and there's people like Duncan MacLean, Barry Graham, Alan Warner, Laura Hurd, Gordon Legg. They all went on to be published they were being published by major publishing houses in London. And it was we didn't really appreciate how unique it was to have all these people in one place, you know, and not a big place as well, you know. And it was all kind of pulled together by Kevin Williamson, who was I kind of knew him vaguely. He was a friend of a friend, basically. And I didn't even know he was a literature guy. I just thought he was a guy that played pool in the Fiddlers, Arms and all that. And Kevin had started this kind of writing competition, and loads of people had kind of from this newspaper that used to run, community newspaper, and that inspired him to set up Rebel Inc. And then we all kind of just started to put on events. And I was at the same time Rave was happening, and I'd kind of this is when I decided that I was going to go back out again. I had one bite of the cherry with punk, and I was going to have a second wave, basically, with Acid House, and I became obsessed with Acid House and dance music. I mean, I got decks, I started DJing, I started promoting, and Kevin was interested and got interested in Acid House as well. So we tried to do these crossover events, and I mean, Kevin did kind of had a whole idea of doing like multimedia events of kind of like DJs and kind of writers and poets and performers and all that. 10 years before people were doing that kind of stuff in London, you know, it was like sort of he was way ahead of the curve with all that. So we kind of had that thing going in Edinburgh, and then I was, you know, it's like things happened very quickly for me with Trainspotting when I was, you know, the first, you know, we published excerpts of it in these magazines. And then it came out in London, and it just did phenomenally well, you know. And then it became a play, then it became a film, and it went international. And I kind of moved back down to London by then, and I found that I had to leave London and get away from all this kind of this juggernaut, basically. And I moved to Amsterdam and had a couple of great years there.
And you know, I read this anecdote in which before Trainspotting was published, you were on a pub with the publisher, and the publisher was like, I don't know if this thing is gonna sell, you know, like obviously you didn't know what would happen with Trainspotting, and you were joking and you said like, maybe I can call a newspaper and like start a rumor, so you know, like the book can create like this buzz and sell, you know. So I guess you were just happy that the book got published. That was for you.
Yeah. I mean, the biggest buzz you'll ever have is when when a publisher publishes your book and they send you the copy of the book and it's out there, you know. That's the biggest buzz you can have. Like anything else, if you sell, you know, 10 copies or 10,000 copies or 10 million copies, it doesn't create the same impact, emotional impact, as it does when you see it actually out there, you know. You get a big buzz when you see it on a stage, you get a big buzz when you see it in a movie theater, as a film and all that, but the first buzz you get is, the biggest one is actually being sort of, I mean, I had kind of like, you know, I had the book, and then it was like #1 on the bestseller list, and you know, and it's like, and I thought that's good, you know, but it was a big buzz, but not as big as the actual book being in your hand.
So
because
when you got sorry. Go ahead.
It's a sort of it's a physical manifestation of what you've actually made. You know, you want to make something that you're thinking about. You know, so it's a physical manifestation of all that conscious activity. So it's a very important thing for you emotionally to get that out there.
But you didn't stop writing, because, you know, after that you publish a book, you know, like pretty much every year, you know, like for a couple of years. So
I was nuts. I went crazy. You know, I was so relieved, you know, that I could find something that I could do, that I was good at, that I would be successful at. You know, that in the sense that I could finish these things and knock them out and write and enjoy it and all that. So it was a giddy liberation. You know, I had all these stories to tell that I was interested in telling, and I wanted to get them out.
Well, after, you know, Trainspotting, which was published in '93, the year after, you published The Acid House, which is the book that I remember like 15, 16 years ago, I saw in a public library in Santiago. You know, there was this stack with counterculture books, like your books, William Burroughs, Iceberg Slim, and like memoirs from like musicians too. And that, I think a lot of people in Chile read that book first before Trainspotting, because Trainspotting got, you know, it got years later to Chile. So I wanted to know specifically a bit about The Acid House, which in a way it feels like, you know, I mean, it comes from the same like universe in a way, and you know, but it's like short stories and like some shorter, some longer. So how was writing that? Was that the same writing that Trainspotting, or different writing?
Yeah, it was different in a way, because some of it is a bit like Trainspotting, in that it's kind of, you know, for want of a better term, kind of urban realist. But a lot of it is kind of fantastical, kind of hyper real. Some of it's just a bit surreal and all that. So it was a chance to do different types of writing. You know, there's some like science fiction stories. There's some sort of there's some kind of weird, fantastical kind of things that are happening. And there's some comedic stories with comic conversions. So it was a chance to do things that were kind of maybe a bit more mixed in terms of tone than Trainspotting, and that's what short stories give you, you know. So it was great fun to write The Acid House, and it was, you know, and when that became a movie, it was much more grittier than Trainspotting as a movie. It was much more kind of gnarly and uglier, and you know, and I really like it as a movie. I think it's a fantastic movie, but it's you know, it's obviously episodic, kind of 3 stories, but. Yeah, I really enjoyed doing The Acid House, and I'm quite proud of it in a way. It's a kind of nice little collection.
Yeah, I remember, you know, going to a flea market, and the guy who used to be my movie dealer, he was like, "Hey, I have a bootleg of this. You're gonna like it, you know, like the Acid House movie." And I was like, "What is this?" You know, like, and then I watched it, and I remember, oh, I watched Trainspotting, you know, like months ago, and I want to get this book from the library and everything. But I guess, you know, when you were like writing or maybe editing The Acid House, you were getting some success because of Trainspotting. And then, you know, like clearly naming the book The Acid House when there was this culture happening. I wonder if that,
yes,
you know, how conscious was that?
It was a total cynical commercial zeitgeist ploy for me. I make no bones about it. You know, there was no reason to call it The Acid House, other than because I wanted it to be called Acid House, basically.
And when did you realize that, for example, like people that went to clubs were reading you? Because, you know, a lot of people that normally didn't read books were like reading you.
Well, that was the thing, you know, they were, and you know, it's like, because I started to be the guy, you know, because I was going to clubs all the time, you know, and suddenly it was like people were whispering and pointing to me, and they were coming up, and they were kind of, you know, they were saying, "Wow, you know, you've read The Acid House. It's a great book. You've nailed it, and all this is us how we live, and this is how we think, and how we, you know," and it was fabulous. And it got me before, actually, in some ways, in some places before Trainspotting, The Acid House was the one, particularly in the Americas, in North America and South America. It was the one that kind of, you know, I was going over to the USA and Canada on tours, and it was like, they were like kind of, "Wow, The Acid House, man, yeah." So so that was that was a big thing. It was like That's the House was the first book that was that I had published in America, and it was the late David Foster Wallace who was very kind and encouraging about it, because he had just Infinite Jest. He'd become a massive star, literary star, and he was incredibly generous and supportive of it. So it kind of gave me an into America, the Acid House, in a way that Trainspotting kind of followed up. But it was the Acid House. It was the first one for me there. Yeah.
And then I guess this is around the time you're published in the US, and then both books are being translated. This is before the movie, but like your stories are going beyond the UK and Scotland in a way. So they're connecting with a global audience, I guess. No? How was that for you? That somewhere like people all around the world were reading your stories?
That was a surprise, because they were so, I felt they were so localized to Edinburgh and kind of working class Edinburgh, particularly. And suddenly, to go to places like Moscow or Johannesburg and people to say, oh, we've got a Spud, we've got a Begbie, we've got a Sick Boy, we've got a Renton, we know all these characters. And that's when it dawned on me that the characters are archetypes, basically, and people recognize them across all different cultures, so that was the strength of them, really. So yeah, that was a big thrill to me that people could recognize it and get it in different places. And then you think to yourself, well, why wouldn't they? Because we're all pretty much the same. You know what I mean? It's like we've all got the same sort of interests and influences and all that, and the kind of cultural parts of it that are different are fairly minor. And you see that as you get the more you travel and the more you meet people from different places, you see these similarities are much, much more important than the differences.
I always remember talking with friends about Trainspotting and the Acid House too, and about stories that are set in Scotland, and Chilean culture is also peripheral. It's also like on the borders of the other main countries. And
right.
That's in a way how, we related to the book, because we also went to this hill near our neighborhood and just complain about how far away from everything, just like in the characters in Trainspotting.
Right.
And, and then, well, maybe if you can tell us about when the movie came out, and that, gives the book a second life, and also your career has a new kick, let's say. How was that specific year, which was 96, I think, when Trainspotting came out?
Yeah, I mean, I can't really remember much about it. I was just probably kind of off my face on ecstasy and cocaine most of that year, basically. I just kind of thought, well, let's just kind of and then I was but then after that, I was probably just chilling out in Amsterdam, sitting on the couch, kind of writing with my laptop. So it was you don't really, it sort of passes you by in a strange way. You don't really, I'm not really, the thing that I did do, which I think was the best thing that I ever did, was I just kept writing. I wasn't really that bothered about kind of basking in the success of it. I kept going to clubs and kind of dancing and having fun at clubs and all that, but I kept writing, I kept working was the most important thing for me to do, and that was a good thing for me to do, because I think that when a lot of people get success, they just kind of they focus on that and they expect everything just to come without working. So I just kept working, basically.
And I guess, there was a certain moment in which you went to a club and you listened to a song that was in the movie, that soundtrack became so ubiquitous. It was everywhere. So in a way,
every DJ seemed to drop Born Slippy. And and it was it was and when Born Slippy would come on, I'd be dancing with friends and all that, and then suddenly a spotlight would kind of be shone on me when the dance floor and all that. Everybody would go, wow, I'm going fuck, I'm just here to dance. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's it's you kind of this is like kind of, you know, Darren Emerson and Carol and Rick's tune and all that. It's nothing to do with me, but, you know, but I was kind of treated like, you know, that the song was mine, you know, basically.
I remember when I finally got a copy of Trainspotting, and I, you know, like read the book in translation, and this is like 5 years after I watched the movie for the first time, and I saw that a lot of the writing was stream of consciousness, you know, and I was like, oh, you know, like this book, it's part of this tradition of like stream of consciousness too, in a way, like urban characters and the stream of consciousness. And I guess maybe this is connected to your songwriting, or I don't know, but how, you know, like why did you use stream of consciousness, or maybe it wasn't conscious at all, you know, because you've used it in other books too, like Filth and so on.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of one of the type of writers who tends to let the subconscious do the heavy lifting, you know, so I'm not actually really sure why I do what I do. You know, I'm not actually sure about the devices that I employ, and it kind of only is something that I'll only look at later on and justify later on, but I'm not really massively clued up about it at the time, if that makes any sense. But, you know, so I tend to kind of bang it down and then sort it out or justify it later on after that.
Do you work in period of times, your books, like 2 months, and then you put it aside or something like that? How does that work?
Every single one is different. I kind of, you know, I think one of the interesting things that you can do as a writer, you get to reinvent the process every time as well as the content, you know, so you can kind of, you can mess around with different ideas and different ways of working. You know, you can sit on a bus and type, or the underground in London and the tube and type, or you can take yourself off to an isolated cottage for a month and say, I'm going to smash out a novel there, you know. So there's no, you know, there's not, you know, a busy hotel room. There's not any one way of doing it, you know. I mean, you can just, you know, or you can make something, you can just bung everything down that comes into your head, or you can actually plan something out in a bit of paper on a wall and all that sort of stuff. So I kind of mix it up all the time. I mean, sometimes I write during the night, sometimes I write during the day, 9 to 5 hours. And that's part of the fun for me. I think to myself, I'm going to have a bit of weird fun writing this next book. I'm going to do something different and write it in a way that I haven't done before and see what kind of different results I have.
What about Trainspotting and the Acid House? Did you write those by hand, typewriter? Were you listening to music?
I was writing them on my works machines. Like, you know, I was sort of, I was like, how would I describe it? I was writing them when I was at work. So I was kind of basically stealing from my employer. I was stealing time from my employer, which is what we all do. And I did it kind of, for a while. I had all the stuff on the works, kind of big mainframe computer. And I just used to, whenever I used to have my own office, and then when the boss came down, I would just switch on to a different screen, and he would see me working on these contracts, stuff like that, you know, which I wasn't really interested in doing.
And what about later, when you could write your books in your private environment? Did you like start listening to music?
Yeah, I mean, I would listen to music at times to set me off, and make up a playlist for characters and a playlist for themes and all that to get me in the mood. And you know, I had a big office. I always have a nice big office suite and all that sort of stuff. But I usually end up in some grotty little cafe in the corner of the cafe writing away. You know, so it's like more than, you know, it just depends on the mood I'm
in. Well, you know, so you were in Amsterdam, and the book and the movie, you know, it was becoming like global. And why did you live like, you know, you've lived everywhere, you know, in a lot of different places and cities. Is that related to creativity too? Like you feel the need to like leave a place?
No, it's not really. I mean, it's usually been chasing different women, because, you know, and kind of ending up in sort of where they are. But it's also been about, I've just wanted to move. You know, just wanted to kind of, I've always wanted to travel and experience living in different places. And that's always been a way that I've kind of done it, you know, is basically through romance. Because I think, you know, travel's a kind of very romantic thing. And if you're a writer, you're very fortunate that you can go anywhere.
Mm.
You know, it doesn't really matter where you are. You know, you can just sit down and as long as you got your laptop, you're fine. Yeah.
Mm. And you know, like a lot of your characters are on the run, or they wish they could live where they are too. There's always that idea in your books of like either, you know, escaping your environment or actually escaping the environment. Like, you know, at the end, at least the movie in Trainspotting, the character ends escaping, you know, the
Yeah, I mean,
environment.
I was like, I never really wanted to, you know. I mean, you know, I love Edinburgh. I love where I come from. I love Leith and Muirhouse and kind of the places I grew up. But so I never wanted to run away.
Mm.
I just wanted to experience different places. You know, I love going back to everywhere that I've kind of lived. You know, and I have a kind of strange loyalty to the places that I've lived. If I go to a different, if I go to a different town to live, a different city somewhere, I always kind of get involved supporting the local football team and all that. I get involved in you know, I try to get involved in the city. I get involved in the club scene, and you know, I try to be a participant, you know, rather than just a voyeur. And a lot of writers are quite voyeuristic. That's our nature. We are just like that, you know. But I try to be not just an observer, but a participant observer. You know, I try to kind of roll my sleeves up and get involved and, you know, take an interest and learn by kind of doing rather than just by observation, you know.
Yeah.
So that's what I love about traveling. I love kind of thinking to myself, you know, the first thing I do when I rock up in a new town, the first thing I'll do is I'll check out a boxing club and get set up there. The second thing I'll do is I'll check out what the clubs and bars are like, and then it's like I'll check out the local sports team. If hopefully, you know, it's usually a soccer team, because I like soccer. But if it's like in America where it's not a big soccer country, you know, I'll check out the baseball, I'll check out the American football, and you know, so it's kind of like that's my way of finding my way into the community and finding the kind of soul of the place. And it's also incredibly enriching for me to do these things, you know, and it gives you a network of friends, of real people who are not just involved, you know, not other writers or not other kind of artists or whatever, you know, just, you know, and that nourishes you, I think, as a writer.
Well, you know, you also have a career as a DJ, and you know, you've been to like book festivals in which you read and present during the day, and then during the night, you know, like you put music either as part of the book festival or in a different venue. When that started to happen, and like you became this, you know, kind of like double agent for the literary world.
Well, you know, it kind of happened. It's when I first started to get success, basically with Trainspotting and all that. I was DJing then, and it was like, what I was finding was that the DJ's hours and the writer's hours were very different. You know, it's like a writer, I like to get up early and start early and bang things out. As a DJ, I was just coming home at that. You know, get up at 6 a.m. as a writer, but you're just coming home if you're DJing. So something had to give, and I basically stopped DJing, and I kind of went full on into the writing, and it was like the thing about it is that it was like I got back into DJing again just a few years ago when I moved to Miami. And the thing about Miami is that because there's so many pool parties and all that, you can DJ during the day. You know, you can do an afternoon pool party, and then you can go to bed at a reasonable hour. So I like doing that, you know, and I kind of got the bug again. And again, things have changed. You know, you're just operating on a USB, basically, like, you know. Instead of carrying 2 big flight cases around, you know, so that was great.
And you know, I interviewed for a newspaper in Chile a couple of weeks ago, and we talked about counterculture, and you said something very interesting that the editor chose to put it as a headline, you know, in which you said that there's no counterculture these days, there's no like street culture, there's just media culture, you know. And in a way, you know, like when you were coming of age, like street created the culture, you know, and it was my case too. But these days that apparently has changed. So I don't know if you could expand on this idea of counterculture and street culture being like completely gone, or and then, you know, like
Well,
media
it's
culture.
technology, you know, it's just technology, really. It's like we don't have, and you know, in countries like Britain, working class culture, music, kind of football and all that, it comes out of the Industrial Revolution, you know. And now we've deindustrialized, and we don't really have an underground anymore. We don't have people who are saying like, work is shit, let's go and fucking open up this grotty little club and all that, you know. Because as soon as anybody does that, it's on the internet and everybody goes and it's just ruined, you know. So, you know, our culture is a media culture now. You know, it's like social media and kind of our own kind of media, our own sort of, we're all like media artists in some kind of way, you know, we're all media performers, probably a better way of putting it in some way. So, so we don't really have an underground that can incubate something like a band or a sound or a, you know, or a kind of writing thing and all that, you know. It's all gone now, you know. I don't know if it can ever come back to the same extent that it was. I think you know, the world is just different now, you know. So I think the 90s was the last of it. That was with Britpop. It was like the requiem mass of British culture. It was like selling everything that we had out to the global marketplace, and we've never really got it back. We've kind of we've sold the family silver, and that's what the internet in a way forces you to do.
I, you know, when the first time someone talked to me about Trainspotting and the acid house, like they remark a lot, you know, that in the books there were like music and drugs and all that, and then the book Trainspotting especially got like a, you know, like the idea of being a drug book in a way. But there is this idea that you've mentioned in interviews in which like Trainspotting is a book about the post-industrial society, because like characters have a lot of time, they cannot find work.
I think every book now has to be about the transition to a world without paid work, and that's the world we're transitioning into, without paid work and without wages. And it's about how do we survive, how do we make a living, how do we get by, you know, how do we have some worth or sense of purpose in that kind of world, you know. So that's the existential crisis that we all face now, and that's what the book is about, basically. You know, that's why it's lasted so long. If it's just a book about people taking drugs, nobody would care. Yeah.
And you know, like, if you know, what about the prequels and sequels? When you write about the characters, do you go back to the books, or do you just start just imagining everything that happened to Rand and all the characters?
I think you have to go back to the books to get the visualization of them again. But you know, but I mean, I kind of I have a lot of stories about them that I've not published. Basically, I've just been writing. I just keep writing more and more stories about all these characters. So I probably will someday publish some more. Yeah.
Will you ever go back to Scotland?
Yeah, I've got a place in Scotland now, and I'm back all the time. I was there during lockdown, and I, you know, I've kind of I've got really into being back in Edinburgh. I really love it, you know, and it's like, and it was great to be there without any kind of traffic or, you know, and everything being shut. I just wandered around all these kind of places that I hadn't seen for years, and all these, saw the changes, and kind of got to kind of know the city again in a way that I hadn't done for a while, you know. So, so yeah, no, I really enjoyed being there, and I've still got the place, you know, so I'm there all the time. You know, I'm kind of between London and Edinburgh all the time.
So, you know, I wanted to ask about being a writer these days. I felt that Netflix and like the narratives Netflix is creating are affecting books too. And I think you mentioned something about that one day you had like a discussion with your agent, and your agent was like, "What are you writing?" And you were like, I'm writing this book. And your agent was like, "Oh, do you think that's a book that maybe in the future can be adapted into a Netflix show?"
I think this is the thing, you know, it's like I think HBO originally changed the whole conversation, and I think television was always a conservative medium. Basically, it was a conservative entertainment medium, and HBO changed that, and they made it much more of an experimental novelistic storytelling medium. And now it's like kind of, fiction went the other way. Fiction, books went the other way. Books became less experimental and about storytelling. They became more about entertainment, about genre, about writing into marketing holes, like kind of romance, crime, thrillers and all that, because it was all about resolution. It was about kind of, catch the villain and lock him up so that suburbanites can sleep easy in their bed, or get this couple falling in love so they can, true love forever, or shoot the monster dead, and so we can kind of relax and all that, So it's all that kind of entertainment, but also that sort of conservative thing, and crept into publishing, and it kind of dominated publishing, and it became more retail led. But it's television, funnily enough, it went the other way. People were starting to take more risks in TV. So TV is really where you get the real novels now. It's like the writers that are drawn to TV are writers who would have been writing novels 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm. Are you writing for television? Because I feel everyone is writing for television.
Yeah. How did you guess?
And what about, like your books were and are like a bridge between music and, literature. And I feel that it's not being fulfilled these days. I don't know if you see writers or like that kind of situation.
Well, it's difficult for them because, as we're going back to the culture thing, they don't have a culture. There isn't if you went to a club, kind of, when I was going to clubs, they were underground, sleazy, different places that were kind of popping up and going, and all, there was a DIY kind of punk acid house culture then. There isn't now. A club's an entertainment place now. It's a place of entertainment. It's got a kind of smart luxury sound system. There's a door policy. There's kind of book in advance and stuff like that, And it makes no bones about being part of the entertainment industry. It's a piece of hardware for an industry. It wasn't back in the day. So there's not a culture around that. There's just a culture of people going out and having fun and going back home again. Whereas there was a whole, if you have an environment whereby you're in a factory with a sound system and the police come and raid it under the criminal justice bill, or you're setting up in a field in a farm, and the farmer paying off a farmer, and then somebody finds it, that creates a whole culture, a whole lawless underground kind of culture, and you meet all these interesting people who are on the fringes of society. It's not like that in Clubland anymore, So so how can people draw influence and inspiration? When you're just when everything's mainstream and entertainment. So that's the thing that that's why it's difficult for writers now. I don't envy them. It's very hard to get traction, to get kind of material in a sense.
How's your opinion about the 90s, about the whole decade and the aesthetics of the 90s? Has that changed through time?
Yeah, very much. I think now it's like there's not a kind of as I say, we're in an entertainment society. We're not in an art society anymore. There's not a kind of urge to transgress. There's an urge to kind of to satisfy, to identify, almost like marketing, to identify a craving or a need or a desire, and then satisfy that desire. It's like you can't, you're not really, it's funny. It's like when you do TV or film, you have to speak in terms that people understand. So you have to say, this is like, it's like The Sopranos meets The Sound of Music or something like that.
Yeah.
You have to you have to couch things in terms that people understand. So you're doing that. You're just basically firing out algorithms. Your own little algorithms for people. But obviously, when you do something, you're not actually bound by that. You're just kind of using that as an example. It's a way of kind of talking to people who have money to make things happen. But it's not really the way you operate as an artist. Basically, you don't operate in that way. But you have to learn that kind of almost like that language to get things done. Yeah.
And if you could be a writer in any time and place, where that would be?
What would I choose to be? I'm not sure, really. I'm not sure. I think that I would never have been a writer in the 2000s and 2010s. I think interestingly enough, got really interesting now. I think it's the age of the science fiction visionary. You know, it's like if you look at probably the most important writer now is a guy who's been dead for decades, like Philip K. Dick. Kind of, he's been proven to be, an incredible visionary in terms of what he's kind of writing. So it's like, if you look at kind of, Orwell and Huxley's science fiction, that's right on the money now and all that, So it's like you have to, the guys like myself and all that who are looking at kind of some kind of, we're in some kind of shifting sweet spot between kind of like fantasy and kind of realism, and but I think it's in a way it's a comfortable place to be, because that seems to be where the world is now. It's like we kind of you can't really be a world leader now unless you're a deluded fantasist. You used to have to be a leader. You used to have to be quite a kind of staid, solid kind of citizen. Now you have to be certifiably insane and a megalomaniac and a head case, basically, before you can even think about sort of becoming kind of leader. You're almost like a Bond villain, a James Bond villain,
Yeah. What about this idea? I don't know if you heard that, we are living in a constant state of nostalgia, because with the internet, we can access the past, we can go and explore the most obscure band of the 70s now. And that wasn't possible in the past.
Yeah, I mean, that's the way it happens now. It's almost like kind of, it's funny now, if you think about you look at on the Spotify and the number of plays and all that, and you think, who's the biggest bands in the world? And you think as well, it's Pink Floyd, Led Zeppelin, the Rolling Stones, Bruce Springsteen, and all that. They're the ones. The kids and all that are still listening to this. It's like things become ossified now. Things that were very big in the analog age, when everything was gargantuan, they become ossified and frozen into the whole system. So it becomes harder for younger, newer acts to break through. Because there's not the material for them to be inspired by on one level, but there's also not the technology is so widespread that there's so much competition. Everybody's coming into that market, so there's not a chance for kind of a few people to kind of really dominate and clean up. And they can't brand themselves. They can't brand themselves in the way that Pink Floyd and the Rolling Stones and all that were able to do.
Well, when you started doing clubs and getting to electronic music, it was a time, I guess, when there was a transition between guitars and rock into more electronic music, like bands like Primal Scream and all that. And these days, when you see what people listen to Spotify, guitars are pretty much out of that, ranking of songs. And since you are in electronic music and all that, what are the trends in electronic music that you've been listening or you care for?
I think the most important thing, it sounds an obvious thing, but the most important thing in electronic music is to be able to dance to it. If it's too heady, or if it's too kind of too big, the beats per minute that kind of scare women off the dance floor when you get to 130 and all that. It's not going to fly, and I think you've just got to. I think the problem with a lot of electronic dance music is it's made by people who don't dance, who don't go to nightclubs. It's made by people in their bedrooms with all their equipments and their digital kind of equipment. So it doesn't feel. There's some really inventive and clever stuff, but it doesn't feel stuff that you can dance to in a club. Funnily enough,
And has been a DJ change your writing? Because DJs works with, remixing, sampling, stuff like that. And writing has some of that too. You never start from zero. You're bringing stuff.
Everything operates in that way now, but it always really has. You can't, you borrow, you kind of, you take and borrow and adapt and amend and change. That's how it's always going to be. It's only in the digital age it's easier to do that now,
Is there a book or song or short story you wish you had written?
A book, it would probably be something kind of it'd be something like the Da Vinci Code.
Okay.
because you do that, and then you don't have to do anything else again. You can just write anything you want. You know, you could you've got the freedom to not bother about anything, and worrying about anything in the marketplace. So like you just not that I do anyway, but it would give me kind of even greater freedom to do what I do.
Yeah. What about a song for 2020? What song would you choose for this year?
Oh, I don't know really. I mean, I think that I think kind of it would be a romantic song. It would be like kind of Smokey Robinson, "What's in Your Life," because I think 2020 has been an incredibly romantic year.
A romantic year?
Yeah.
What do you mean with that?
There's a lot of love in the air. I mean, I've kind of I've known a lot of people and myself as well who've fallen in love in this year. I mean, and there's been a lot of romance and a lot of kind of a lot of good things. I mean, people are focusing on the divorce rate and people falling out with each other and mental illness and all that. But there's been a lot of great things too. People have gotten out and they've walked and they've kind of got back to nature and they've kind of learned to live with a lot less kind of crap blocking up the life. So it's not been. I'm not saying it's been a great thing, and there's been a lot of pain that people have suffered, and the economy's tanked, and it's been tough economically. Continue to get tough economically for people, but there's been great things as well, and you have to focus on the positives too.
And well, just to end the conversation, let's go back to where we were at the beginning, in which you were 25 and you were in London, and now you're back to London after many years living outside of the UK and all that. How does it feel to be back in London?
It's always great, it's always great to be home because I've got so many friends, in London and so many friends in Edinburgh and family and all that. And it's wonderful to be around them again, so yeah, it's just a pure joy. I mean, obviously things have changed, the city's changed, both cities have changed. But that's part and parcel of life. Things are always changing, and some ways for the worse, some ways for the better. But you don't want things to stay the same. You want things to keep changing. Makes it interesting.
Yeah. Well, Irvine, thank you for your time, your answers, books, music.
Thank you.
And we hope to see you one day in
I would love to.
Valparaiso, and in Santiago. There's a couple of clubs in which many times I went to parties that were pretty much based on your book and the music and all that, and I think that people dancing to you would be great. And
I would love it. I would love to DJ there. I'd love to kind of come and read and do chats and all that. It'd be fabulous.
That's great. Well, now we know people at
now you know where
Mascara.
I am. You know where I am. You know how to get me. So brilliant. Okay, thanks a lot, buddy.
Thank you very much.
Cheers.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye. Muchas gracias por acompañarnos y no se pierdan las actividades de Puerto de Ideas Valparaíso. Eso. Muchas gracias.